The fire burned warmly that evening beneath the crooked rafters of the sleeping stag. Outside, rain drifted softly through the narrow streets of Dunmere, washing the lantern light into golden rivers along the old stone paths. Travelers had come in early from the roads, seeking dry boots, warm stew, and the comfort of crowded voices before the mountain fog settled for the night. Inside the tavern, music hummed quietly from the far corner, where an old woman plucked at the strings of a weathered lute. Tankards clinked gently. Someone laughed near the hearth. The scent of roasted onions, pine smoke, and mulled wine filled the air so completely that even the cold seemed unwilling to enter. And there, beside the great fire, sat the traveler. Most in Dunmere did not know his real name. Some called him the Wayfarer. Others simply called him Storyteller. He never corrected either. His cloak still carried traces of road dust despite the rain. And beside his chair rested an old leather satchel covered in faded markings no one in town could read. He visited only a few times each year. Always when the nights grew colder, and every time he returned, the tavern filled before sunset. Because the traveler carried stories, not the loud sort told by merchants boasting over ale, not heroic songs sung by drunken sailors. His stories were quieter than that, older, the sort that made people lean closer to the fire without realizing they had done so. That evening, nearly every seat in the tavern had been taken. Even the children had remained awake longer than their parents normally allowed, gathered near the hearth with blankets wrapped around their shoulders. The innkeeper's daughter moved carefully between the tables, carrying steaming bowls of stew before finally pausing beside the traveler. "You promised us a new one tonight," she said softly. A few nearby villagers smiled. The traveler looked into the fire for a moment before answering. "Yes," he said. His voice was calm and worn smooth by many years on distant roads. "I believe I did." The lute music quieted slightly. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled softly through the mountains. The traveler rested one hand against his cup. "This story," he said, "was not told to me by a king or scholar." A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "In truth, I first overheard it by accident." A few listeners shifted closer. The fire cracked gently. "It happened many years ago," the traveler continued, "in a port city far south of the Glass Coast, where the sea smells of salt and smoke and every alley carries whispers from another land." His eyes reflected the firelight now. "I had rented a room above a fish market near the harbor. Cheap walls, thin floors, impossible to sleep." Several villagers chuckled quietly. "So instead," he said, "I listened." Outside, the wind rose briefly against the tavern shutters. "And below my room," he continued, "sat 4 travelers who believed no one could hear them." The traveler paused long enough to sip from his cup. They spoke of an object they intended to return. He glanced slowly around the tavern. "A Ruby Bengal." The room had grown very still now. "Not large," he said, "not ornate. A simple band of dark silver set with a deep crimson stone." He held 2 fingers apart slightly. "Small enough to fit inside a coat pocket." A boy near the hearth frowned. "If it was so small," he asked quietly, "why didn't they just mail it back?" Soft laughter spread through the tavern. The traveler smiled faintly. "A fair question." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "Because by the time they found it, 3 men were already dead." The laughter disappeared instantly. Rain whispered softly outside. The traveler lowered his gaze toward the fire again. The four who carried it called themselves many things during their journey. Traders in one town, pilgrims in another. Mercenaries once, though none of them fought particularly well. A few grins returned around the room. But they shared one thing in common, he continued. None of them trusted the bangle. The innkeeper approached quietly and refilled the traveler's cup without interrupting. The traveler nodded his thanks before continuing. They found it nearly 800 miles from where it belonged. A murmur spread through the listeners. Buried beneath the floorboards of an abandoned watchtower along the northern cliffs. He paused. The strange part was not that the bangle had been hidden. His eyes lifted slowly. It was that no one could explain how it arrived there. The fire shifted. Shadows moved gently along the tavern walls. One of the travelers, he said, a cartographer named Elian, believed the tower had once belonged to smugglers. Another insisted thieves had carried the artifact north after a shipwreck years ago. He shook his head once, but the oldest among them disagreed. The traveler's voice softened slightly now. He believed the bangle had not traveled by ship at all. A long silence settled over the room. The lute player had stopped entirely now. Even the tavern kitchen had grown quiet. What did he think? Someone asked softly. The traveler looked toward the rain-covered windows. He believed, he said slowly, that the bangle had crossed the distance by itself. The room remained silent. A log shifted inside the hearth, sending a small burst of sparks upward. The traveler continued before anyone could interrupt. The old man's name was Corvin, gray-bearded, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He claimed to have spent years studying unusual relics gathered from forgotten ruins and dead kingdoms. He smiled faintly. Most assumed he was half mad. Another pause. But Corvin knew things. The traveler tapped one finger lightly against his cup. He knew the markings etched beneath the ruby. His voice lowered, and he knew enough to fear them. Outside, the thunder rolled again, closer this time. According to Corvin, the traveler said quietly, the bangle belonged to a family in the eastern kingdom of Valor. He let the name settle into the room. A wealthy house, once known for strange scholarship and sealed libraries. The innkeeper frowned slightly. I've never heard of Valor. The traveler nodded. Few have. Another sip from the cup. Because most maps no longer mark the roads leading there. A colder silence settled over the tavern now. Not fear, anticipation. The traveler looked around slowly at the gathered faces. And that, he said softly, was the beginning of their journey. He leaned back into his chair. The first mistake they made, a faint smile crossed his face, was believing they were only returning a lost treasure. Outside, rain drifted steadily through the dark mountain town. Inside the sleeping stag, no one moved from the fire.